Hello, and welcome to another update video on Bitcoin. So the Bitcoin chart is still, in oversold, you could say nearly oversold territory. It touched the oversold region on Friday. This is when I made a first purchase. I think the first purchase I've made since February or March. I would need to double check, but that was when Bitcoin was oversold back then. So I'm buying into the weakness actively. And again, that is because everybody's getting bearish, and I'm not talking about bearish. I'm talking about really bearish. I mean, people are like losing their minds over the bearishness. It's actually it's completely ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. I don't get what's going on. People are like absolutely losing their minds. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing particularly bullish yet. Yeah, no low confirmed, but we have an oversold reading on the daily RSI, which has historically just been a really, really good sign to buy. I mean, it was back then in February, March. And I'm not saying this is the actual low. So anybody who's buying into weakness needs to be aware that the price could easily drop another, I don't know, 10% or so, easily. But that's just like, of course, if you're trading with leverage and futures, that's a different story, yeah. Short term, I'm not bullish yet, but short to medium term, I'm watching for a significant bounce. This might be a bounce that could occur either in Yellow Wave B, here on our daily chart. It could be a rally that could even take us to new all-time highs. Even in this B wave, it could. Yeah. It might be the low of a wave 2, even though I find that a bit more speculative, but that's absolutely possible. Or it could be the low of the third wave, and then a fourth wave bounce could start soon, right? Even that would be quite significant and could take us maybe even above 100K. Now, over the last few weeks, I've been bearish, looking for lower prices here. There was no clear impulse up. We've been tracking 3-wave movements to the upside, and specifically the 5-wave declines that led to the 4th of November mini crash were clear setups for lower prices. And since then, there hasn't really been any meaningful low confirmed. So people think, and I still am short-term bearish, but obviously the more this pattern gets filled in that we've been tracking, the more likely a larger bounce gets. And if we then use some additional indicators like the Fear and Greed Index, or the Relative Strength Index, or even the Death Cross, it becomes more and more obvious that we should be quite close to a low of sorts. And yes, I'm tracking microstructures that should still take us to 91.5K. But when you look at hundreds of charts every week, you develop kind of an intuition. And I can tell you that while I'm still looking for lower short term, this is nothing I would short. And also, I do not expect every single wave and pattern on the 15-minute chart to be completed to perfection, right? This is what some people seem to think, right? It just doesn't, it's delusional, right? So the more this pattern gets completed, the more likely a larger bounce will become. We're now in a support area. We clearly haven't found support so that a reversal is unfolding, but I shared it with you in yesterday's video. Some of you will have watched that video. If we go to the long-term chart for Bitcoin, and we have and I posted that on X as well, and people started to try to discuss this, and it's just, there's no way you can we can debate it, but it's still true what I said, that after every death cross in the last 5 years, there was at least a 50% bounce. And that doesn't mean it has to happen from, exactly here. But it came sort of roughly from the area. Of course, it's a slightly simplified view, but even if we get, a 40% bounce at least. Even if we go a little lower and then start a 40% bounce, guys. Okay? You know what I mean? I'm not saying this has to happen to the same degree. But you know what? The market is extremely oversold, so a relief bounce is due anyway. So we had this same situation back in March, April this year. And if we measure from the low, easily 40%. But it moved higher, right? All right, next one. From the August 24 low. Well, of course, I'm talking about from the death cross, right? Here. From the September 23 low. Oh, yeah, don't need to measure that. You know, you see it. People asked about this one. What after the death cross in January 22? Tricky one, because it led us into the bear market. However, the death cross occurred here in that week around 40K. The market dropped after that to 33K. Yeah, it is what it is. But then, after the death cross, it still pumped to the same level, retested the 200-day moving average, and pumped 45%. Just a week later. Okay? Do we have another? Yeah, this was also a death cross. No, death cross was here. Death cross was here. Happened and moved back a little bit lower the week after, and then pumped, yeah, more than 40%, right? So as I said, in the last 5 years, I mean, did I miss one? I'm not sure, but also here, this death cross marked pretty much the COVID low. It was a week late, okay, a couple of weeks late. No, it was a week late. But then, you know what happened afterwards. So, was this a death cross? I think it was. Yeah, but even that pumped 40%, didn't it? Even though it might not look like that. But when that death cross hit, here, October 2019, yeah, it pumped 40%, guys. So, it's true what it said. And, I mean, even here in 2018, death cross, it moved down a week later, but then pumped over 40%. We can go back. I'm not sure if it's always like that, but I just looked the last 5 years. Not quite sure. Here I think it did in 2015, but that's 10 years ago, guys. No, hold on. This is the golden cross. This is the death cross. Yeah, I mean, there was a death cross here, and it pumped to new highs. I guess this is a bit messy here. Yeah, here it didn't really. There was a death cross here also in 2014, and it pumped also like way more than 40%. This is, yeah, here it probably didn't. Okay, I mean, yeah, after a few weeks, but then it crashed completely. But that's, well, guys, we're 2014 now, so I think it's a good indicator to, at least from this region, to expect a bounce. I mentioned yesterday this is not an indicator that predicts an absolute low, but guys, it's an indicator which shows oversold conditions better than anything else. All right, so that's what it is. And when there are significant oversold conditions, even in a bear market, there can be a pump. Maybe not this week, maybe in a few weeks' time. Good enough for me. And I'm not going in aggressively yet, okay? So it has to be with some common sense. So let's take a quick look at the Bitcoin short-term chart. I don't think much changed there anyway. No, we're just moving below resistance. So this is our first resistance area here. So again, I don't expect all of these micro patterns to be filled in to perfection, okay? So I said to you yesterday, I'm still looking for lower prices overall. The market moved down a little bit. I changed the microstructures here a little bit on the 15-minute chart, and someone wrote, oh, it's wrong again. It's ridiculous. Well, we haven't bottomed yet, guys. So I'm still looking for lower, but expect some stuff to morph here in this region on the 15-minute chart, because the market is trying to form a low here. Some buyers are starting to come in. Yeah? One of them is me. And people see this, it's oversold, and people get interested again below 90K. Now, I don't necessarily expect the low has formed yet, but I can tell you that this is getting more and more likely, and at some point people will be left out, and then they will feel the FOMO, and then they will buy the rally. Mark these words, right? Save this. Especially because there are wave counts where the move to the downside can be completed, but without a clear setup, like a 5-wave move up above resistance and a 3-wave move down, there is no Elliott Wave setup. Still though, on the larger time frame, I find it an attractive area to buy, and I will add as we go lower. Now, primarily, I'm still looking for lower, and it should, in circle wave 3, here on the 15-minute chart, take us down to around about 91.5K. If we go a little higher, we're probably already in circle wave 4, okay? But that's why we have the zone, right? The zones are more important than the labels, very, very important. So not much change since yesterday, it's just been grinding sideways. We're basically now where we were when I made the video on Saturday, so yeah. I think the larger time frame is a bit more interesting at the moment. I'll keep you updated. Hope you liked the update. If you did, please hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. And if you're interested in additional updates, then also make sure you follow us on X for additional updates, charts, news, and much more. Feel free to follow us here. Sometimes I mention here as well when I buy. So I think this week I'm going to buy a little more. I'll keep you updated. Feel free to follow us there. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.